There's an estimated 7.7 million animal species living on Earth alongside us humans, so it's no surprise that they get a little too close for comfort sometimes. From a huge horde of spiders to a swarm of blood-sucking mosquitoes, some creepy critters are determined to move in with you whether you like it or not. So grab the bug spray and try not to get too itchy as we take a look at some of the craziest pest infestations and how people tried and sometimes failed to handle them. Rattlesnake ruckus. Back in 2019, a man in Texas suddenly started having problems with his cable service. Wanting to see if he could fix the problem himself, he rolled up his sleeves and clambered into the crawl space of his house, assuming it was probably just a loose wire somewhere. As he crawled forward, he noticed a couple of rattlesnakes. These sneaky snakes are common across Texas, where they're considered something of a pest, but the venom in their bite can cause nausea, sweating, blurred vision, and worse, which is why crawling around in an enclosed space with them isn't ideal. And for this guy, it got a whole lot worse when he realized there weren't just 1 or 2 rattlesnakes, but 45 of them hiding out under his house. Understandably, he bailed hard and, after escaping snake bite free, called the experts at Big Country Snake Removal. Heading into the dark, snake-filled crevice, the removal team undertook the nightmarish job of clearing them all out. Armed with only a long claw and balls of steel, the team pulled the slithery serpents out one by one. After every last one had been cautiously transferred into buckets, the man was left with a big decision. What was he going to do with them? You see, this guy lived a little over 40 minutes away from Sweetwater, a district famous for the Sweetwater Rattlesnake Roundup. Every year in Sweetwater, the controversial festival sees over 250,000 wild rattlesnakes captured and held in plastic bins before being butchered. Advocates of the event say it promotes awareness of rattlesnakes and boosts the economy, while critics argue it's barbaric and should be banned. Even so, the festival organizers pay over $10 per pound of snake donated. And considering a medium-sized rattlesnake can weigh up to 6 pounds, our man was sitting on roughly $2,700 of rattlesnake revenue. But instead of taking the money, he opted to have them all driven off to a quiet location and released back into the wild. What a snake savior. Now, if you were in this guy's shoes, would you have done what he did for free or sent the snakes off to their doom for cash? Let me know down in the comments. Explosive solutions. Cockroaches. While they might be one of the most despised creatures ever, you can't deny their resilience. They thrive on toxic food, they can regrow their limbs, and can even survive for several days without their head. They're a real nightmare to get rid of, as one Brazilian couple discovered the hard way. Back in 2019, this couple were being plagued by the tough terrors in their backyard. One day, the husband had enough and decided to test just how tough they really were. How? By, emptying a can of gasoline into their nest and throwing matches on it. Real big brain thinking right there. The first match didn't do anything. Neither did the second, but what about the third? Yep, there we go. Turns out pouring flammable gas all over your lawn isn't a good idea. Who'd have thought? But no cockroaches could have survived that, surely. Nope. That was definitely one there. Hey, he's probably watching this video right now, pointing himself out to his roachy little friends. Actually, no, sorry, that's stupid. There's no way cockroaches have friends. Now, although humans can often be even more resilient than cockroaches, sometimes it does still get a bit too much for us. That's why I'd like to thank this video's sponsor, BetterHelp, for being there when times are hard. Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your long-term goals? Whether it's the stress of school, the loss of a loved one, or you just feel down and don't know why, BetterHelp is here for you. Unlike using self-help books or crisis lines, you'll have access to BetterHelp's huge network of expert counselors. They'll assess your individual needs and match you with a licensed therapist that's just right for you. And because BetterHelp is all online, there's no traveling or sitting around awkwardly in a therapist's waiting room. Instead, you can log in to your account anytime, wherever you are, and message your counselor, as well as schedule weekly video or phone sessions. But it's not just easier than traditional counseling, it's cheaper too, with financial aid available if you need it. What's more, if you decide you'd like a different counselor, it's free and easy to change. And that's because BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit betterhelp.com/beamazed. That's BetterHelp to get 10% off your first month. The link's in the description below. Once you've followed it, answer the short questionnaire and create an account. Now, with some emotional support in place, let's delve back into some rather awful infestations, shall we? Bat Bonanza. Say what you want about bats, but I've always found the furry flyers kinda cute. Although I still wouldn't want a bunch of wild ones inside my house. But somewhere in an undisclosed part of the US, Reddit user IrishTrain2020 returned home one day to find a whole load of them in his sink, behind his TV, and clinging to the blinds. Turns out the bats had crawled in through a gap near the roof while he was out and got trapped. Like any normal person, Irish Train got the heck out of there. I know I said they were cute, but with all the bacteria and rabies viruses they can carry, I wouldn't stick around after seeing them in my sink either. So after getting his rabies vaccination, Irish Train returned to the house about a week later, equipped with heavy gloves to remove the beasties within. Only when he got back in, there were a hell of a lot more. Okay, now I'd be seriously freaked out. The shocked homeowner reckoned that while he'd been gone, another 200 or so bats had moved in. Is Irish Train just a cover name for Bruce Wayne or something? With his super thick gloves equipped, our real-life Batman proceeded to pick up every bat individually and put them in a cage in his car. From there, he drove them a good few miles away and released them back into the wild. I don't think I'd have acted so calmly. I'd have been driven absolutely batty. And you might go a bit batty too if you miss out on any of the amazing new videos I'll be posting in the future. So go ahead, hit those like and subscribe buttons down below and never be bored again. Alright, where were we? Webby Wigglers. If you'd gone roaming the streets of Rotterdam in the Netherlands back in 2009, you might have seen a very strange sight. All across the ground and up in the trees, a thick, white, web-like substance had been deposited. You'd have been forgiven for thinking this was some weird alien invasion, but no, this wasn't the work of excited extraterrestrials. Rather, a throng of ermine moth caterpillars. These caterpillars are very slow creatures, which would normally leave them open to attack from predators like birds. However, by moving together as a pack and spinning masses of thick, silk-like web wherever they go, they conceal themselves from being easy prey. Unfortunately for the owner of this car, they tend to go pretty wild with the sheer volume of web they produce. Jeez, imagine trying to clean all that off. Thankfully, ermine moth caterpillars are completely harmless to humans. But there's something about seeing them all wriggling and writhing around that just turns my stomach. No, I think I'd just buy a new car and accept my losses. Don't eat beetles. Dogs are odd animals. On the one hand, they're cute, fluffy, and love cuddles. On the other hand, they also love eating poop. But poop isn't the only gross thing they like to eat. In Kansas City back in 2016, Frances Jurix let her dog Bailey out to pee. When Bailey came back in, though, it was obvious something wasn't right. The dog was unusually lethargic and, worse, was starting to foam at the mouth. Frances immediately rushed him to the vets. When they examined him, they discovered a horrifying sight. Clinging to the inside of the dog's mouth were 30 to 40 fully grown lady beetles. Oh god, that's making the roof of my mouth itch. These critters are called Asian lady beetles and are very different from the friendly, iconic ladybug. They're typically rounder, smaller, have slightly different markings, and are known as pests. Not only are they more aggressive than ladybugs, but they secrete a disgusting scent when threatened or crushed. So if you see one, don't stomp it. But you'd be unlikely to see just one because these things come in droves. If running for the hills isn't an option, the best thing to do is clear them away with a broom and scrub where they were with soapy water. You'll need to do this, as the little blighters leave pheromones wherever they go to attract even more of them. But poor Bailey had tried to eat the bugs, and instead of being swallowed, they'd stubbornly latched onto the roof of the dog's mouth. Thankfully, the grotesque bugs were cleared out of its mouth with no lasting harm done. But if left, they could have caused painful ulcers. Ugh. They might be called lady beetles, but there's nothing ladylike about them. Mosquito mayhem. I heard a mosquito in my room the other night, and I was terrified. Although the sound of one is nothing compared to what a Polish family went through one evening in 2016. In Poland, the weather is often very wet, followed immediately by hot spells. In other words, perfect breeding conditions for the flying bloodsuckers. Sometimes there are so many that entire swarms of the blasted bugs roam around like angry, itchy clouds. How on earth this family could stand in amongst all that, I'll never know. But the insane number of fallen mosquitoes completely coated the ground like a living carpet. Never fear though. Just get the trusty old broom out. Yeah, that looks like it's doing loads to help. Elsewhere in Poland, people have thought of other, more convincing solutions, like distributing nesting boxes for bats and swifts around neighborhoods to encourage them to settle. Both are big predators of mosquitoes and can gobble up thousands of them a day, which seems like a better plan than just sweeping them into piles. But I'd still rather live somewhere where I don't have to think about this particular problem. Mosquito, no thanks. Birds and turds. Although swifts have been solving problems in Poland, over in Torrance, California, they were the problem itself. After enjoying a meal in April 2021, a family came home and were met with an astonishing sight. Hundreds of birds were swooping down their chimney, just like the ones shown here. Head of the house, Carrie, called animal control, but they just told her to keep the doors open and hope for the best. Despite doing this, the birds would not leave. So she enlisted the help of her brave relative, Patrick. While Carrie and her family slept in a hotel that night, Patrick got to work inside the house, which the feathered friends had claimed as their own. Wads of bird doo-doo covered pretty much everything in sight, and the culprits were rocketing around like Usain Bolt with wings, careening off the walls and even slamming into Patrick himself. He ran after them for hours, catching as many as he could with his bare hands and putting them in a cardboard box before throwing them outside. Eventually, it got so late that the remaining birds settled on the ceiling to sleep, which made the process easier. Even so, it wasn't until 2 nights later that the house was finally free again, albeit a lot poopier. The freaky phenomenon wasn't a one-off either. Northwest of Torrance in Montecito, another swarm of birds descended somebody else's chimney, though this time they got trapped behind the grating. Firefighters on the scene set up a chute system to funnel the distressed birds from the fireplace to the back door, where they were eventually freed. So luckily, the house escaped the turd-filled fate of the one in Torrance. But why do birds seem to love chimneys so much? Well, when searching for somewhere to roost, they look for comfortable, secure places safe from predators. And unfortunately for some homeowners, chimneys fit the bill perfectly. Or should I say, fit the beak. Yeah, I'll see myself out for that one. Spidery surprise. I don't know about you, but if I see a single spider in my room, I have to resist the urge to burn my entire house to the ground. So it's a good thing I don't live in Australia because I'd have burnt down most of the country by now. In early 2021, a mom in Sydney got home from work when her daughter told her there were a couple of spiders in her room. Assuming a couple meant 2 or 3, the mom casually walked into her daughter's room and was shocked.
When you go in your daughter's room, and she says, "Mom, you've got a bunch of spiders up there. Little baby's one." And it's like, "Oh, that's not too bad. It's just like maybe 50, 60. But then she says, "Look in the other corner. There's more. And they're alive."
In a move that may surprise you, she decided to leave the 8-legged arachnids alone. It turned out they were huntsman spiders, which are harmless to humans and love eating household pests, like mosquitoes, though I'm not sure whether the daughter was happy about her mom's decision. Elsewhere in Australia, the Gray family have chosen a similar approach, only rather than a ton of tiny huntsmen, their house harbors this. Oh my god. This behemoth is also a huntsman, but measures in around 6 inches wide, roughly the same size as a dollar bill. Would you welcome a huge huntsman into your home, or would you try and nuke that thing? Let me know down in the comments. Quite the buzz. I think we can all agree that bees are great. They're an essential part of our ecosystem and make delicious honey to boot. That doesn't mean they make great housemates, though. When Sarah Weaver and her husband bought a new farmhouse in Pennsylvania in December 2020, the seller warned that there were bees in the walls. The price was so good, though, that they couldn't resist the bargain. And for a while, it seemed their risky purchase had paid off. That is, until spring arrived. It started with one innocent bee buzzing outside in the yard, then another, and another. And before long, hundreds of the stripy guys were whizzing around day in, day out. Staying inside was no solace. The couple could hear the insects' droning hum permeating through the walls wherever they went. Something had to be done, and they hired professional beekeeper Alan Latanzi to solve the problem. Over the next week, Alan labored every day to remove bricks and tiles from the outside of the farmhouse. Every time he removed one, he found more bees scurrying around making honey within the walls of the house. Fortunately, they were fairly docile, and Alan estimated there were a whopping 450,000 of them in total. Little by little, the beekeeper extracted them with their honeycomb until eventually he found the queen. He needed to relocate the hive, and as the queen lays all the eggs, without her, the colony wouldn't survive. After the last bee was extracted, Alan took the near 500,000-strong colony to a nearby farm. Incredibly, through the whole process, he was only stung 5 times. He is a professional, though. If it were me, I'd have probably fallen into the hive head first and ended up with a sticky, swollen head the size of a watermelon. Bugged out. If you've gotten this far without feeling even a little squeamish, hey, congratulations. But I'm afraid that's about to end. Back in 2019, a bedbug exterminator was called out to a house somewhere in the USA. What he found behind the couch there will make your skin crawl.
This is going to be, oh my.
These ain't just any bugs, these are bedbugs. The lentil-sized insects can squeeze themselves into all kinds of cracks and crevices, and considering a single female might lay up to 500 eggs in her lifetime, they spread like wildfire. The bitey bloodsucker's favorite meal is human, but they can go without feeding for an absurd 550 days. That means you can't starve them out. So the idea that anyone could let their house get this bad before calling in the exterminator is beyond me. Imagine sitting on that couch and, actually, don't. The only solution once these little horrors have gotten into your home is to thoroughly clean every single inch of your house, including all your possessions. Because once you're infested, nowhere is safe, not even your phone. I know Apple products have a few bugs, but that is ridiculous. Stinky situation. Somewhat less repulsive than the bedbug is the stink bug. which you'd never guess based on its name alone. These little beetles don't bite humans, but they're known as pests that devour fruit and vegetable crops. Well, one October evening in 2017, a South Carolinian couple, Pat and Simon, found out just how much of a pest they can really be. The couple were watching TV when Pat realized she'd left the French doors in their bedroom open. Upon going upstairs to close them, however, she was met with a sight that made her scream. Thousands upon thousands of stink bugs had flown in and were crawling all over the walls, floor, bed, and everywhere else. Paul quickly rushed upstairs too and was horrified at what had happened. When they'd both recovered, they grabbed a couple of brooms and started frantically sweeping the walls in an attempt to brush the bugs outside. The only thing was, every time they threw one load out, another seemed to immediately fly in. And to make matters worse, if they swept too aggressively, they'd crush the insects, releasing the foul-smelling scent they get their name from. Eventually, after an entire night of cleaning behind paintings, in drawers, and inside clothing, they collapsed in bed and fell asleep. But for days after, the stubborn stink bugs kept reappearing, some even falling out of the hair dryer. Ooh, remind me never to leave my doors or windows open ever again. Kill it with fire. Remember the poor Brazilian guy earlier who accidentally destroyed his backyard trying to get rid of a couple of cockroaches? Well, a resident in Pana, Illinois, one-upped this effort back in 2010 by getting the whole fire department involved. You see, the guy who lived here was a hoarder, and he'd let the place get so dirty that roaches had completely taken over. Trash was piled high, filth carpeted the floor, and the roaches were absolutely everywhere. It was so bad that the local authorities deemed the house uninhabitable. So, in an ironic twist, the firefighters arrived on the scene not to stop a fire, but to start one. First, a 2-foot deep trench was dug around the perimeter of the house and filled with wood and straw. Then, any hazardous materials were removed from the building's interior and replaced with combustible ones. After this, it was time to burn, baby, burn. To prevent any particularly cocky roaches making a run for it and escaping, the trench was set alight. From there, the house itself was put to the flames and left long enough to ensure everything inside was burnt with it. Eventually, when there was no chance of anything surviving the raging roachocalypse, the firefighters did their more traditional job of putting out the flames. Did anyone else half expect a giant, vengeful mega roach to rise up from the ashes, or was that just me? Army antics. I don't think I'd ever be particularly pleased to see a massive horde of ants around my house, but what if an absolute boatload of bigger, more vicious army ants were gathering their forces right outside your front door? Well, you might be surprised to know that one Costa Rican homeowner was actually very happy about such an occurrence. Why? Because he had a much bigger problem at hand. A big ol' wasp nest hanging from his porch. Luckily for him, army ants feed on wasps, and they got their dinner in the craziest way imaginable. That's right. Those are all ants you're seeing. Using small interlocking hooks on their legs, some of the ants linked together to form a bridge for the other ones to cross, all the way from the porch to the nest. Which is impressive and everything, but you might be wondering why they didn't just go straight across the roof and avoid all that effort. Well, the thing is, ants find it difficult enough walking upside down on their own, never mind carrying a heavy load like eggs, pupae, or even adult wasps. So, by forming a U-shaped bridge, none of the clever critters had to risk the dreaded ceiling walk. They even optimized traffic along the way. Outbound ants scurried along the edges to make the way for inbound ants coming home with the spoils. There you have it. The homeowner's problem was solved in the most brilliant way possible. The handyman can. Okay, What about if you have a wasp nest on your porch and you don't happen to have an army of ants to save the day? Well, one Florida man facing just such a dilemma back in 2017 took matters into his own hands, literally. Born in Trinidad, the man claims he's dealt with wasps using his bare hands for over 20 years.
See the nest up there? I'm going to go up the ladder. There's a little one here that I just killed.
Yep, he plucked that one right off the wall, and just wait till you see how he handled the whole nest.
So, let me see how I'll do this. I'll go in, I'll grab every last one.
Okay, whatever you do, don't try this at home. Somehow, the fearless fella snatched the entire nest and crushed it all in his hands, wasps and all, without getting stung even once. In fact, he claims to have done it more than 50 times without so much as a tickle. They say there's a fine line between bravery and stupidity, but whatever you think, you can't deny it worked. Though there's no way you'll catch me doing it. The whole process looks like it's too much of a handful. Ugh. My stomach's squirming as much as those creepy crawlies after that absolute horror show. Which infestation made you itch the most? Let me know down in the comments below. Now I'm off to go watch some puppy videos or something. Thanks for watching.